this first bit, Zack and I talked about the impact of our parents in the formation of our identity, and how the painful experiences that come from our earlier years are the very ones that we're dealing with and trying to resolve today. Our early experiences and the people who play a part in them implant themselves inside our head as endlessly looping voices that we accept as our own. Our values, choices, decisions, and patterns of behavior are usually based on these voices or programs in our mind. Because these programs are subconscious, they run our lives unless we can catch them and replace them. Our early years of development and the experiences we undergo during these periods affect our view of ourself, our view of the world, and ultimately our relationship with both. Genuine connection is the foundation of our happiness and our ability to not only function, but express our talents, live our purpose, and, taking a quote from Zack's book, to thrive. Our ability to connect with others in a meaningful and creative way is based on our ability to connect with ourselves, which means to know who we truly are and tap into our innate potentials. And this requires us to go beyond the distorted and often crippling voices in our head. For most of us, this is a lifelong process, but it is what matters most. It is our way to evolve. Zack is a great example of someone who is doing exactly this, showing us it can be done. So tune in and be inspired by the strength of our human spirit to overcome the obstacles in its way on the road to identity.
I have been broken at times, and it goes right into what you just said. Yeah. So it's very insightful for you to look that deep and bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I caught the lack of information about it, that meant that there was a deeper layer to that.
I definitely appreciate that about you. And obviously your clinical work in the past, you're empathetic, and you connect well with others also. So
I have a 6-page packet that I put together from everything that I researched about you. So that helped me, but I definitely didn't want to go through that question by question. It's very important to be able to absorb that enough to then just talk to you on the soul level to the extent possible.
Which I appreciate, you know. There are times in social settings, and I think people that go through different life experiences, I don't know what drives this for me. Sometimes it's pain or depression. I get weary of just the surface level conversations, and I find that more often. And so I'm the type that instead of going to a function with 30 people, I would much rather sit with 3 people for the same amount of time intentionally and talk on a deeper level. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that about you. Yeah.
Thank you. And likewise, you know, you have this incredible genuineness, which of course I saw in the Epic Mile, you know, this honesty, this raw honesty where you were able to communicate emotions of what you were going through. And so there's an incredible fusion of this male and female aspect with you, nothing to do with femininity in the way that we think about it, you know, in society, but this incredible male and female fusion, which enables you to do that. And that in itself, I think, is another innate quality that you have. And probably because some of these qualities, you have such a difficult journey because your soul has a certain connectedness within itself, and it wants to do bigger things with that. It wants to connect the field of consciousness through your own personal disconnection and the journey towards connection with yourself on the next level. You're able to probably work with the field of consciousness, which is of course what you're drawn to in these talks that you're naturally gifted at and speaking. I think about that incredible emotive expression that you had in the film and just the honesty of that, the genuineness. That's very powerful.
Well, thank you for saying that. I have to give my mother some credit, because I think she curated an atmosphere where I could talk. We talked very deeply all the time. And even though she wasn't always there, when she was very intentional. And it almost, gave me this foundation of one-on-one communication at a deeper level, and allowed me, I think, to use that later on in life. So I have to give her credit for that. She would not allow me to just be a dude. She wasn't
That is
gonna.
really awesome. That is really awesome. It sounds like she was raw and honest in her
Yes,
character.
very, very powerful, very magnetic, energetic. Um, yeah, she would stop a room when she walked in, and she was very in tune with other people. She's very in tune with their emotions, and oftentimes I get in trouble for that. Just happened the other day where I can sense something is off with somebody, and then if I ask and they're not necessarily ready to talk about that, they end up doing so. And she had a sense about her that was uncanny and amazing. She could tell about people. She had a very good sense about people. She was definitely aware, and so people would open up to her in communication, without much prompting. She just had a calming sense. She was magnetic and energetic, but she had a calming sense about her, and people felt connected to her right away, which is where I think I got that ability to sit and connect with people on a deeper level, or the desire to. Um, yeah.
So her sensitivity, interesting, was maybe part of her struggles because, when we're more thin-skinned or feel things so much more than others, we are open to a whole different layer of energy and struggles, within our psyche that others who are more closed off are not.
Yes.
It's interesting.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And as somebody who's been through as much medicating as I have, through medical
Mm.
doctors and too much at times, and injury, I find that the lows are very low, and I feel those, but I don't feel the highs anymore. And so for a long time, that was a very dangerous spot for me. And that led to, the suicidal ideation and other parts of my struggle. But even to this day, the things that used to give me the highs don't. And you feel the lows like deep trenches. It could be as basic as a professional actor, former professional actor. I love movies. I used to go to a movie by myself at least twice a month. And it was a highlight. And I would get that
Mm.
excitement beforehand, and it's the unknown, and you get to block everything out. I don't
Yeah.
get any of that anymore. And
Yeah.
it's almost like everything is numb
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
except the lows. And you feel the lows
Yeah.
uh, deeply. And so navigating that has been another part of my journey that I've had to come to terms with, and then my wife and I have had to navigate together. So I do crazy things like hike from Mexico to Canada to get those highs, or motorcycle
Yeah.
adventures,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
some of the other crazy things that I do
Mm-hmm.
in order to feel the highs. But everyday life highs don't happen.
Is this after the medication that you stopped feeling highs and just felt the lows?
It is.
So this
Yeah,
is
it
how it
was.
affected the nervous system, basically.
Yeah. So I've been on a journey to find other sources and other things, than just popping medications. Unfortunately, our Veterans Affairs system is very happy and willing to put a bunch of pills in your hand and tell you to take those. But when you do that for as many years as I did, and you have the side effects that come with that, um, physically and cognitively, that last for a long time, I was very eager to get away from all of that as soon as I could.
It's
Yeah.
amazing that you have been able to, and I would say that thank God you have an incredible vital force, if you know what that is. In homeopathy, we use that term a lot. It's like a life force. You have a strong life force, and the fact that you were able to get away from all of that after being on these meds and everything, that you've been going through, and not even knowing how to address the pain otherwise, that in itself is amazing. And of course, there's this whole other topic that can be addressed at another point, which is I can't imagine the level of anger that you have to work through with what you could say is a betrayal by the very system that you
Mm.
have been wanting to serve and believe in, and the whole betrayal through the medical system, even though this is the consciousness state of the world. Unfortunately, that's where we are. So there's no ultimate blame. We all have to go through this somehow and find answers that then we can share with the world, the wounded healer journey. But there's this whole layer of the bitterness and anger and everything else that you can talk to for people going through this that have been betrayed by the very system that they have been serving and believing in. And that must be very deep pain.
It was a lot of years where I was angry. I lost friends. It did not serve me, but I had to process through all of that because my injury was just a simple injury. It was the botched surgery and subsequent surgeries that had happened, and lack of identifying loose metal objects in my shoulder that ruined it for the rest of my life. That I went through that anger. And it took somebody close to me to point out how angry I was becoming and then try to put me on a path to alter that. To get back to something you said, I think I have always felt this deep drive. And I believe a lot of us do, and we don't know what it is. A lot of us are, people talk about purpose and they're trying to figure out their reason for being here. I always felt a deep drive that I was going to accomplish something great. I did not know what that was or how to go about it. But I think that in these dark moments was the one thing that just kept me saying, this is not it. Then I would try to pursue other things. And this is hopefully helpful for anybody that may be experiencing that, where you're in this bitter state where you have to go through those cycles of anger, right? And almost purge your system. And for me, one of the ways out of that is accomplishment. And accomplishment came through pursuing dance. People used to make fun of me for dancing. And so I set out to try to overcome these other areas where I was deficient. And so I took a class, and then I started teaching classes, and I became much better. I was never phenomenal, but I got much better. And that little bit of hope, that little bit of reassurance, built my self-esteem back up. And then I would pursue something else and get validation from that. And so for me, pursuing goals, setting goals, pursuing them, and achieving them is a driving factor for me, which again goes back to why would anybody hike from Mexico to Canada for 5 months and sleep outdoors?
And record it, journal it. That's quite
Yes.
something, how honest. And listening to this last piece that you were talking about, I want to actually come back to another quality that it seems to me is so innate to you. And again, is probably one of the reasons that you go through what you go through, which is you have this factor, which is all about igniting people. I'm thinking that this whole challenging journey, mildly put, that you're going through is in order to be able to ignite the greater field of people, of consciousness. You can't do the kind of thing that you're doing without having this quality of being able to ignite others. And that is not an easy journey for those of us who carry this kind of a fire. And what
Agreed.
has pushed you to do the things that you have done, again, it's that fire. And the sense, like you say, that you know that you're here to really do something. You feel it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. And there's a balance with that.
Yeah.
I have learned over the years, when we finished the film, made the film and did the circuit on displaying it and doing premieres. And that's how I got into public speaking. We would show the film and then people would ask me to do a presentation afterwards, that I had to find a way to balance my own energy, because I would give so much and I would put out so much that if I did not retreat and recharge, I found myself burning out. And I did. After 2 years, I had a flat burnout and crashed, and then went off grid.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that I like talking to people about, is find that out within yourself, analyze yourself and how you operate. Where do you feel like you have the most energy? Where do you feel like you have the drive? And then what recharges that battery? Because without that, you will burn out. And then we're helpful to nobody.
Yeah, that comes back to riding the dragon, especially when you have such a fire element. It's really
Mm,
learning to ride your dragon. So that's what it is. You have to literally start to understand energy, to understand what drains you, what gives it to you, how much to use, in what amount, with who. You have to start to become much more intuitive with this more invisible level of your system and the wellness
yes.
of your system. So that's another interesting topic that we talked about with Jesse, the skateboard pro. He's
Hmm.
constantly living on that edge, and he has that fire too. And it's not an easy element. It's a very difficult element. You literally have to go into this invisible world to start to work with your energy, like a martial artist, like a ballet dancer. These kind of people, they live in a parallel world to us. They're still in the physical, visible world, but they do not live the mundane or more mundane level of what we consider a normal life. They literally have to work with their energy. They have to work beyond gravity and work with all of these elements, some of which you mentioned, which is, what drains me, what doesn't, who do I connect with,
Hmm.
how do I connect with them, what does it mean to connect. Otherwise they can't work, or worse, they basically have an injury that can kill them or leave them without a career. It's a very different level of existence. That's why I call it a parallel world. You have to live on a more elevated level with a more conscious state of being while being on this earth, where we're all not living in that state of being. And that's very difficult. And that's why people like that also really survive being within a guild structure. That's what ballet is. The ballet world, the theater, is very protected, because you have to live in a guild structure to be with a consciousness that is similar to you and protects what you're doing, because you cannot be among the ordinary, more descended masses. And part of what you're doing, again, is you want to ignite and illuminate the masses of people who are in a more descended state, but going through this most difficult journey, this human journey of trying to put themselves together in some way or other, and going beyond the ego, and just understanding the very basic principles of what it means to find out who I am.
And what we're seeing, with athletes is, you mentioned injury, and
Mhm.
a lot of times that journey, that transition, whether it's retirement, early retirement due to injury, or what have you, all of the structure they have put in place usually revolves around their sport or their service or their
Mhm.
craft.
Mhm.
If you have to step out of that, it's almost like rebuilding all of those tools again. And that's where, we're trying to help people understand how to thrive
Well,
and
it's
work.
really rebuilding yourself on a new level, isn't it? Isn't it finding your identity on the next level?
It is. We hear it from athletes all the time. Michael Phelps, best swimmer
Hmm.
ever, was suicidal after his last Olympic Games,
Yeah.
because he had hit the top of the top, and it was, what's next?
Yeah.
Who am I now? And the who am I now is important, whether we reach that at 80 years old or whether we reach it at 20, or, in my instance, 18 after injury. It's, you thought you were on one path, things change. Who am I now? And yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into that. Absolutely. For the longest time, I thought my injury defined who I was and what I could or could not do, which is where the inspiration for the hike happened. When I felt like I was this old version of myself and I could no longer do any kind of athletic endeavor because it just flared up my pain, and then I decided to get back to what I used to do as a kid, and that was hiking. And that was the most low impact thing I could think of. I had allowed myself to be defined by my injury, and I had so much more to give the world. I had to realize that's not who I was. That wasn't my defining characteristic. It was just a part of my story.
It was saying, I am not defined by my injury. The whole hike was about going through that.
Yes. And,
Hmm.
you've talked about in past episodes, having a purpose and having a vision and how important that is. I knew I was finishing that trail. Less than 4,000 humans had ever finished it the year I did it. I knew I was finishing it. And people came out for twisted knees or blisters or, just the mental struggle of hiking
Yeah.
25
Yeah.
miles a day, feeling like you got hit by a truck. For me, there was zero question. I was finishing it, and then I had to figure out how, because of exactly what you just said. I was
Mhm.
not going to allow the injury to define the outcome of my hike and my journey.
Isn't that powerful to have that why, to have that vision behind what we're doing?
It
That's
is,
what
and
gives power to the physical.
it is, and it creates a fire within you that can't be put
Mhm.
out when you find it.
Yeah.
And it also, when you're on track and on purpose and on task, it allows you to push away the clutter. It allows you to sift through all the noise and
Mhm.
all the what ifs and all the, is this important or is that important? It becomes very clear what is important and what's not, and that allowed me to realign my life and make family a priority and make my 2-year-old a priority ever since the day he was born.
Yeah.
And it allows me to pursue the work that I'm doing because I know the purpose that I'm on, and that fuels me, and I can put parameters around that because that's my focus. Now, here's something I do want to share with the audience is it's very important to celebrate those victories along the way. Halfway through the trail, and I think I even say it in the film, I got to a point, it was exactly halfway, and I
Mhm.
say to the camera, I'm halfway, but that's not good enough. I'm going to the end. And what I realized that week is I had missed a ton of views. I had missed a lot of scenery because metaphorically and physically, I was just focused on the end
Mhm.
result.
Mhm.
And in life, some of the best parts of life happen in the journey to get where we're going. And so after that, I made it a point to celebrate every day, every new view, every new camping spot I had, every new waterfall or field of flowers. Like just try to celebrate those little victories along the way. And it made the journey so much more enjoyable.
So it's like being alive to the present moment, which is
100%. That's all we have.
that's all we
That's
have.
all we have.
I
That
mean,
is
isn't
the
that going
only
beyond
thing.
time in a sense when you understand that you can only be alive in your experience to the present moment?
And I think it adds intentionality to our actions. If you're in the future or you're in the past, you're not in the present and you're not necessarily intentional about what it is that you're pursuing at that time. I often talk to people, there's no such thing in my view as balance in life, but there is balance in the quality of what you're engaged with. And so for me, the balance comes from you and I are talking right now, and I am 100% focused on this conversation and right here and present with you. And that's the only way that we can have true communication. Once we get off this call, that will shift to something else. But when we spread ourselves too thin, we're not able to be present in the moment. And like we just said, that's all we have. So when you're present in the moment, you will find more balance in everything that you do.
Coming back to athletes and soldiers, it is so critical that the mindset is actually in the present moment because that's the difference between life and death.
It is.
Focus, purpose, knowing who you are, knowing your identity. These are some of the things we've been talking about, and now I want to share with you a picture of what this looks like. George Birkadze has been one of our collaborators, and through his own experience, a fierce proponent of educating the world about ballet, daring us to see it through a new and broader lens, where it is not only an exceptional art form, but an instrument that develops our mind, body, and character, giving us the tools to take our life to greater heights in whatever direction we choose. Here's a little bit from a short film in which George has been featured for his strong mindset and unique accomplishments.
All dancers are fighters, and all fighters are dancers. I was bullied because I was a young dancer. They were saying that I'm feminine. It was insulting. I am a black belt first degree in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm black belt in Judo, and I am black belt third degree in Kyokushinkai Karate. In ballet and in martial arts, you want to maintain your balance. In both, you want to perform technique, so it looks beautiful in ballet and cool in martial arts. You're training every day to make your execution excellent. And ballet make me better martial artist. As a dancer, nobody ever can tell me that I'm weak.
It's really great to have this conversation. And yeah, I look forward to, like you say, circling back and continuing it. And I'm sure it'll be very genuine and interesting on a very different level if we do come back to this.
Yes. And I appreciate your depth and your intentionality and your communication and genuineness.
What matters most, it was very real. And there's a lot of rich stuff that we can move on to from here.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Same here.
Thank you so much.